Hey guys, today I want to talk about the books I want to read in 2022, aka this brand new year that hopefully will be a better reading year for me than 2021 was. I typically hate TBRs because I'm like a really moody reader and I just want to pick up what I want to pick up. I don't want to have a strict schedule. That's why I can't do them monthly, but I do like the idea of doing a yearly one. And for this pile of books here, I've tried to avoid doing books that I'm really excited about and more so making it about like the books that I want to be reading, which I realize sounds the exact same. For me, this is more like goal-oriented. Not gore, goal-oriented. Like, for example, I want to be reading more nonfiction, so half of these books are nonfiction. The fiction books that I chose are authors that I really want to read, even if it's not necessarily at the top of like what I'm in the mood for right now. I hope this makes sense. This intro is too long. Let's just get started and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so the first book on my list is Hopscotch, a novel by Julio Cortázar. This is actually my partner's book. He's talked about it a lot and I get really interested in it every time he talks about it, but I've never picked it up. The thing is that I don't know anything about this plot. The fun part about this novel is that you can read it in different ways. You can read it just start to finish like a normal novel, but then the author has also created like an alternate way of reading it where you like hopscotch amongst the chapters, and he's given you a guide in here. So for instance, you start at chapter 73, then go to chapter 1, then 2, then 116. It's like a different experience for the story. I find that really intriguing. I think it's really cool. And like I said, my partner has typed it up for me, so this is one that I really want to get to this year. Then I have nonfiction, the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. This is really self-explanatory. It's the autobiography of Malcolm X. I really want to learn more about Black history, especially Black Revolutionary history. I'm really interested in the Black Panthers, and I know a tiny amount, but I really want to make it my goal to educate myself more this year. I've also been really into memoirs lately, so I feel like this might be an easy one for me to pick up to like ease myself into reading more nonfiction throughout the year. And just in general, I'd love to learn more about Malcolm X specifically. After that, I've got Margaret Atwood's Dearly. This is a collection of poetry. First of all, I love this cover. That and it being by Margaret Atwood is pretty much the only reason I bought it. I don't read poetry much. I'm not as into it as I am to like a full story. But that being said, I'd like to change that. I'd like to start getting more into poetry because I could see myself really enjoying it. I think this would be a good pick, like a good first pick for me getting into poetry because I like Margaret Atwood. I like her fiction. So I feel like maybe that's an easier transition into poetry. So choose an author that I already like and see what her poetry is like. Plus, my partner has also challenged me to read more poetry this year, so I want to get a head start on that. Then I have A People's Guide to Capitalism, An Introduction to Marxist Economics by Hadass Tier. I'm sorry for pronouncing that last name wrong. This is supposed to be like a very accessible, reader-friendly way to understand Marxist economics. Like I said, I want to educate myself this year, and I definitely want to pick up more Marxist texts. I think this might be, again, as I've said for multiple books already, an easy way to transition into that. I've actually heard a lot of really glowing reviews of this, and to be honest, economics is something I just like, my brain turns off whenever people talk about it. So I think it might be better for me to pick this up before I go into something like Capital or De Capital, which I always feel like I need to say it like that for some reason. No, it's not De, it's Das. I don't know. I'm not German, whatever. Anyway, I should probably learn more about economics. I completely skipped that as a poli-sci major. I just took the more humanities-oriented classes, so probably time I learn, right? Like something about it, not be completely ignorant. Next is a book I've talked about disgustingly much. That is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I've read this series, I love this series, and I've been meaning to read it again. This was like the series that really got me into reading again. Like I've always been into reading, but when I read this, I started reading much more heavily. So ever since I've read this, I've become a much more critical reader. So I'd really love to go back into it with fresh eyes and see if I still feel the same, which is a little worrying because I would hate to not like this. But regardless, I think this year is the time for the reread. And then surprise, surprise, another nonfiction. This time it's The Red Deal, Indigenous Action to Save Our Earth by the Red Nation. The Red Nation, it's like, I don't know how exactly to explain them. They have like podcast series that I'm really into. One of the main members is Nick Estes, which I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's amazing and you should definitely listen to his podcast. This is a novel that like the organization that I'm pretty sure he founded put out. It's kind of a response to the Green Deal, but from a more indigenous, anti-imperialist perspective, and it provides a vision for a decolonized society. I listened to a podcast of him talking about this book before it came out, and it kind of like blew my mind. I just think he's brilliant, and this book is so short. And I would love to learn more about the Indigenous perspective on especially such a pressing issue such as climate change and decolonizing land. So excited to pick this one up. I have no excuse. It's too tiny to not pick up. The next thing on my list isn't really a book so much as it's just an author. I really want to read Ursula Le Guin this year. These are just the 2 books that my partner has by her. So these are my 2 options to start. We've got The Left Hand of Darkness and The Lathe of Heaven. I've heard this one's really popular. I don't really know. I don't know what either of these are about. What I do know is that Ursula Le Guin writes sci-fi. She also writes some poetry, I think. But what I'm really interested in the sci-fi, because from my understanding, it's inspired by like social events and also a socialist perspective on things. I really like Octavia Butler for the same reason. Like something like Parable of the Sower is Octavia Butler's sci-fi response to the issue of climate change. So I'm really interested in another author who examines like stuff through the sci-fi lens, especially considering that she's a socialist, was a socialist. I have a feeling she could really be a new favorite, so heavily anticipating picking these up, or one of them. Who knows what I'm going to read. Then the next nonfiction on my list is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. This is a book, again, that does not need any explanation. It's about how Europe underdeveloped Africa. I want to learn more about Africa. I want to learn more about colonization. I want to learn more about post-colonial society. I've heard so much praise for this author as well. This one's really, really high up on the list for me. And then again, another author situation. I really want to pick up some James Baldwin this year. These are the 2 books that my partner has. I'm just pilfering his books now. And they are If Beale Street Could Talk and No Name in the Streets. From my understanding, If Beale Street Could Talk is like fiction. The back says it's a moving story of love in the face of injustice. Hi, Saphira. So that intrigues me. I know that he's like a great writer, but I've never read anything by him. Saphira, don't jump up there. My cat's trying to jump up on my camera. Hey, no. I also know that this was made into a movie, which I'm less interested in, but I'd love to finally read some Baldwin. And then the other one, I think, is a memoir. It's a memoir on an extraordinary history of the turbulent 60s and early 70s. That's not for me. I also know that this is the book that inspired the rapper No Name to make her name No Name. So that also intrigues me. And then the last book that we have here is another nonfiction, but this one's so fucking cool. And that is The Shape of Sex, Non-Binary Gender from Genesis to the Renaissance by Leah Devon. First off, this cover's so cool. I find the whole idea of this book to be so fucking cool. Basically, my understanding is that it's like a history of the Western European sexual categories and the bodies that exceed them. I'm so interested in this, especially because I feel like it's, from the cover, I feel like it's gonna delve into like artistic renderings. I just think this is gonna be so cool. I'm so pumped for this. And there you have it. Those are the books that are on the top of my TBR for the year 2022. I don't know why I did this. I look like a Mr. Krabs. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon with another one. Goodbye.